Thank you very much. Good afternoon and welcome everyone to the Public Safety Committee. We have one topic today. We're going to be discussing and making recommendations on Bill 4520, which is the community policing data. We have had two previous work sessions where we have had, as was described in the packet, some robust discussions. The lead sponsors on this bill are Council Members Jawando and the Public Safety Committee, Councilmember Katz, Hucker, and Albornoz, and was co-sponsored by Council Members Reamer, Rice, Friedson, Navarro, and Glass. And as we begin, I would like to thank Ms. Wellens on preparing this topic, this packet. And we're pleased to be joined by, and if I miss someone on the screen, please let me know, but Lieutenant Jordan Satitsky from the Montgomery County Police Department, Assistant Chief Darren Frank. I don't see Dr. Elaine Bonner-Tompkins from the Office of Legislative Oversight, but I see someone on the screen that says Office of Legislative Oversight. Yes, we do see her. How are you, Doctor? Good to see you. And I believe, and Susan Farag from staff is here as well as Ms. Wellens. Am I missing anybody else from this? No? Okay. The Bill 4520 would require the Montgomery County Police Department to make certain reports to the county executive and county council and to post certain data sets regarding officer-community interactions on Data Montgomery. The purpose of the bill is to implement the recommendations of the OLO, the Office of Legislative Oversight, regarding the use of data to enhance community policing. It defines the term detention in the county policing law. It talks about tracking and reporting on data on street stops and field interviews. It talks about regularly surveying residents and staff on police community relations, and build capacity to use policing data to advance best practices in constitutional and community policing, to collect and report race and ethnicity data for every policing data set, and to post additional policing data on Data Montgomery that aligns with internal data sets, including data on criminal and civil citations. As we get into the specifics of the bill, I'm going to ask Ms. Wellens to please lead us through the packet and to remind us of what has happened in the previous work sessions. And then there's seven decision points to discuss. Hopefully we will get to all of them today, and hopefully we will finish this topic today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. Does anybody on the committee have any opening remarks? Okay, does anybody else who's on the call have any opening remarks? With that, Ms. Wellens, you are up, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, council members. So I will give you a brief sketch of what happened at the prior work sessions and then delve into the issues. As you noted, Mr. Chair, there was robust discussion at prior sessions. I think it's fair to say that this bill is, on the one hand, seems fairly straightforward, and on the other hand, involves a lot of complexity. So at the first work session, the committee voted to adopt two sets of amendments. The first set related to requiring an explanation by the department if certain data sets about interactions with individuals are required to be kept confidential under applicable law, and also an amendment to require an annual survey of residents and officers regarding issues of community trust. At the second work session, the committee adopted amendments regarding including data about gender, regarding including additional information in the department's annual report about officer discipline, violations of use of force policy, and the number of investigations conducted by internal affairs, an amendment to require the reporting of data regarding the pointing of weapons as distinguished from simply drawing a weapon from a holster, but actually pointing it at an individual, And then an amendment to require data disaggregated by race and ethnicity concerning trespass enforcement, and an amendment requiring the identification of a public point of contact for data within the department. And the amendments that I just summarized, both from the first and second work sessions, are incorporated into the version of the bill that you see in the staff packet at Circle 1. So going into the issues, Mr. Chair, the first issue, the committee had previously requested some additional research on how other jurisdictions handle data collection. So as you can see in the packet, there's some examples of other large jurisdictions and other local jurisdictions. Council staff, based on this review of the other jurisdictions, has one potential amendment for your consideration, which would be to add age data where that is available. And I don't know if the police department would have views on this, but it does seem that a number of other large jurisdictions, in addition to collecting race data about gender and race and ethnicity, collect information about age where that's available.
Is Chief or Lieutenant, do you have any comment on that?
Sorry, I'm working on two separate computers here. I apologize. Mouse is attached to the other one. Reference the age and data information that pops in from what we have in our internal system. It doesn't translate very well from our report management system out to anywhere else yet. We're in the process of getting a new report management system. And when that comes online, that's actually part of the RFP and REOI we put out, was to get that kind of data out. Currently, the only way for data to come out when it comes to age, race, sex, when it comes to arrests and certain information, especially arrests, it goes to DOCR first. And we don't have a link back. So that's been kind of an issue, but that's where we stand on that right now.
All right. So let me, and on that topic, when this, and we're working towards getting this legislation passed. When will your new software, et cetera, be up and running so that this could actually, we could actually be doing this work?
We are actually in the process right now of talking with the main contract person from the place that the agency that was chosen. I don't have a good timeline. I'm sorry. I'm kind of new at this part of it. Chief, do you want to step in? I'm not sure.
Yeah, right now, the earliest we see is 18 months. We're just at the beginning stages of getting into contract negotiations. There actually hasn't been a selection announced. And we're going through the back end things like this, being able to get access to this data and have it make sense and produced in this RMS system. But we're in a good place with the RMS. But yeah, 18 months to implementation at the very least.
All right. And is there anything, as we go along, as we wait for the new software, is there anything that we can be doing, that you could be doing before you get the new software, so some of this could be coming online prior to? I mean, we want as I'm speaking for me right now, but I would like as much information as is humanly possible and computerized possible to be as transparent as it can possibly be. But we also don't want to put anyone in a way that they would be violating this because we don't have the capacity to do it. So what I would like is, and I don't know that we have the information today, but what I would like is to know what we can do before we get the additional software capacity and what we would then do once we get it.
Right. So, and I would agree. I think we're of the same position that we want to provide whatever data that we can give that'll add to the picture. The one thing that I'm a bit of a stickler about is correct data,
yes.
And ensuring that our output is, well, it's either correct or, with the council's understanding, the being able to explain our shortfalls. Apologize for that. Being able to explain our shortfalls and how we're going to overcome them with the new RMS system. So once we have a sense for the final bill that's going forward, we can add the comments of, okay, we're going to do our best to get you this, but please understand these are our limitations we'll see if we can work collaboratively from there until we can get to that final solution.
Okay. And Council Vice President, please.
Thank you. Could you talk a little bit for the public's just information about the system we've selected? I know you guys went through a very arduous process, and that we've selected a system or in the negotiation. Can you just speak generally about that system? Because I've had a chance to learn a little bit more about it. I think our public would benefit knowing its complexities and how it really is going to put the department in a much better position moving forward to be able to access information, but to be able to put in information and then be able to access it in a way that's digestible and actually present some really strong opportunities from a training standpoint. But I think, Chief, the public would benefit from knowing a little bit more about the system you all are focusing on.
Sure, absolutely. Let's start from where we're beginning, which is the system that we chose that we've had now for, what is it, Jordan, 15 years at least?
About that, yeah.
Was a system, quite honestly, that was deployed by an agency that was nowhere near our size, and it was the option at the time, and we quickly outgrew it. And there were many things that it didn't do. It went out of service as far as updates, and just especially nowadays can't accomplish what is being expected of us from our community, from our partners. So with that in mind, we have 3 vendors. I will say that our RFP was written to take into account a lot of the things that were occurring. This started actually before George Floyd and continued on after that event. The things that we kept getting asked by council, by state groups, by citizen groups, all of this information that we just didn't have a way to get well, and it wasn't in our processes too. There are a couple things here that just have never been in our process. I've had discussions over the last year, people ask, why can't you tell me, how many people of this nationality were arrested or this religion? It's something we never asked before, because we were coming at it from a long-standing tradition of, we don't care about, and I say that it shouldn't affect race, color, creed, or condition on what we're doing. That's why we don't ask, because we didn't want biases. But now we're being asked to produce that information. So that's a culture change. But anyway, the RFP process, there's a lot of things that go in there. One of the important things that I've been getting educated in the last 6 months since I've been in my chair is how complex the back end of our technology is. We have many different systems. You have the CRIMS system with DOCR. You have state reporting systems. You have state ticketing systems, state field reporting systems. And they're all based on different architectures, yet we want them all to talk. So right now, again, we have 3 finalists that I will say, compared to when our current e-justice was taken many, many years ago, these 3 groups are at the top of the game. They have extensive history working with large organizations with large data needs. They have extensive infrastructure to be able to write the programming that is needed to make all of our different systems talk, and to also allow my internal staff to pull information out. One of the important things to realize, we're ordering an off-the-shelf system because we want it to work. Now, there are features that you can put in, just like when you buy a car, right? You can get leather seats, you can get the entertainment system in the back, and we're looking at all those different options to put in. But at the end of the day, the end users in my information technology division, they got to be able to pick into this system and pull out some other data, because it's not going to automatically produce the reports that we want. So that's another thing that goes into it. But this new system is going to be a one-stop shop for our patrol officers to intuitively enter information in a way that makes sense and is efficient for them. so that they can get the appropriate information and stay in service. That information will then go to our detectives, and our detectives will now have a real records management system where they can, a integrated records management system where they can access data, they can write their supplement reports. Supervisors can readily have a very, very clear picture on what's going on with investigations. And then all of that information will feed into the different requests we are getting, specifically from this bill and also from the Police Accountability Act that are now going to be requirements. And the work group, there's about 10 of us that are working on just the back end of making sure that all this data is somehow captured in an intuitive manner that doesn't become an extra step, that a failure point, if you would, for collecting this data.
That's super helpful. I think I appreciated you providing that context because it's relevant to this entire discussion. I'll also note two things, having been a former department head for a massive transition in the software package, having DTS, every step of the way within that transition, because you've got your internal stakeholders, which are law enforcement officials who have to make sure that the back end information, you've got our frontline stakeholders who are inputting the data, but underlying all of that is the very complex software implications, compounding all of the other issues related that we're all familiar with in conversions of various software. So, we're talking about 15 months for full implementation. I want our public to understand how complex it is to implement a system like this, both with the integration of software, the training of staff, the coordination with internal and external technology services. And we haven't even talked about the corresponding agencies who are our partners that we have to tap into their systems as well. And we're a little bit at the mercy of those systems because we can't control what the state does. So I think, giving you all a reasonable runway to implement the system so that it's done right on the front end makes all the sense in the world. I certainly associate myself with our chair's comments about wanting to make sure we can implement as much of this as possible. And there's no question there are things that we can implement now. My understanding is we've already started to collect some additional layers of information, and that has been transposed through training. And it is a culture change. It's not just a culture change here, but across the country. And so I appreciate the amount of attention being placed on this, because I think it's not only going to help internally, it's going to help externally as well on a lot of different levels. So more comment and feedback there than questions, but wanted to share that.
No, and they're very relevant points and highlights the difficulty in this process. The other thing I wanted to add too is this implementation. It's not like opening a store and congratulations, you're open. It's actually going to be ongoing well past 18 months, 24 months, because there are things that there's so much to do to make work. Some things we're going to have to put down the road as work orders to fix as we go through. And I'm sure you're familiar with this. As you start deploying, you're like, oh, missed that. So now we got to do a work order and get that working. And to be honest, the council may ask for additional information that we didn't think of. I will say that in my role as major crimes director, when we were going through a couple different series of events, the council team came up with questions every couple months that we had just never thought of collecting data on that, and they were relevant. And it took a minute to figure it out. Now this is going to be on a bigger level than just asking major crimes for things. But one of the nice things that we think with the vendor that we ultimately choose is some flexibility in having stuff reprogrammed, because they are. We have confidence in again our top three selections that they're going to be in business for a long time.
I'll just make one final point for now, Mr. Chair, on this issue. And Dr. Bonner-Tompkins and I have had conversations about this, but and she did an outstanding amount of work that got us here in the first place. But the census has shown us this last time around that even within, so as chair of HHS, we're having these conversations as well. there's a lot of complexities within ethnicity and culture. And even, to a trained individual, it's difficult to be able to ascertain, and we learned this through the census process, how everyone sees themselves. And so I am heartened to know that we'll have a system in place that will be able to evolve as we evolve as a society, and being able to provide much more specific identification information, which helps all of us in how we deliver services and how we administer county policies, procedures, and laws, so that we can get under the surface of what's going on and be able to have better information. But it's complex work, is I think the headline here, in how we aggregate this data. Do you identify as Afro-Latino? Do you identify as Black, or do you identify as Latino? There's a lot there that all of us need to wrestle with and think through. So I appreciate this conversation. It just brings up a lot of issues that I think we're trying to tackle here, but that are all very important.
Thank you. And I do think it should be noted that once we get the new software, and hopefully everything will be on time, that doesn't mean it will be, but hopefully it will be. There's always a few glitches or two once we get it. So we have to give ourselves the proper time as quickly as we can to get this done. Council President, do you have anything to add, or should we go on to the next? Oh, well, I did want to mention I'm in favor of adding age to the data that we capture when we can capture age to the system. Am I seeing head shake? Yes. I have two heads shaking yes. Okay. Ms. Wellens, did you catch that we're in favor of age being added? Okay.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you want me to move on to item 2?
I do, please.
Okay, wonderful. So item number 2 addresses recommendations of the 2021 Reimagining Public Safety Task Force. And during your last work session on this bill, you worked through many of those relevant recommendations to figure out how to incorporate them into this bill. There were 2 remaining issues, potential amendments deriving from the task force recommendations. One was whether there should be a mandatory public hearing before the council on the police department's annual report that it submits regarding community policing data. And then the other one related to whether on the online data that's reported by the police department, if they should be required to provide essentially an explanation of terms. This really goes to Council Member Albernos's point about the complexity of identifying race or ethnicity. So there might be terms that are used such as other when describing a race or ethnicity, and what is meant by that data set. So that's the idea, to just provide some greater context for the public. So those are the 2 separate amendments that you might wish to consider. And I would note regarding the mandatory public hearing that as council staff, I would suggest that you not make a public hearing mandatory simply because in the other sections of the code or your procedures where you have mandatory public hearings, it's in connection with a decision point about a specific issue. And so more of as a process matter, I would suggest not making that mandatory, but you can still, of course, hold any public hearings that you wish to hold. That's, simply the staff kind of perspective on a process issue. And, I leave it happy to try to answer any additional questions on these points. Thank you.
And thank you for that. And to the point about the public hearing, I don't know whether we have to use the term public hearing, whether we could say a public discussion or however it would be. I was going to ask about the definition of a public hearing, and do you use public hearing under these types of terms? But I do believe that at least once a year, there should be a public discussion or whatever that the public has a right to say, this is working, this isn't working, let's figure out what we have. So if there's a way to change the term, I'd be in favor of both of these. To my colleagues on the committee. You're good?
Yep.
Okay. So if we can, Ms. Wellens, if you can get out of thesaurus and figure out a different term, then I think that might help us. Okay? With that,
Thank you,
we're
Mr.
going to
Chair.
all the way over to number 3, I believe.
Wonderful. So the item number 3 relates to the contents of the police department's annual report, which it will be submitting to the county executive and the county council. There were a number of suggestions by the Silver Spring Justice Coalition and other advocates related to the contents of this report. And you can see, I'm at the bottom of page 6 of the staff memorandum, you can see the bullet points of the items that advocates recommended including. And then at the bottom of midway down page 7, you'll see the text of an amendment for your consideration. This amendment is an attempt to incorporate the suggestions of the advocates, providing some greater depth to the annual report. And you can see bottom of say 7 going on to 8, what those additions would look like. But I should note that subsequent to providing you with the staff memorandum, the Silver Spring Justice Coalition did note that they believe that in addition to the items listed here in this amendment, that it would also be important to include with respect to service calls for homelessness, mental health, and homelessness. Sorry if I repeated myself there, but with respect to those service calls, that it should also include data on who responds to the calls. In particular, I believe they're getting at, is this a law enforcement response or mental health resources response, or both? How did the county respond to this? So I guess what's really before your consideration, Mr. Chair, is this amendment at the bottom, starting at the bottom of page 7, with that potential addition of who responds to the service calls.
And I think those are good suggestions. Councilmember Auburn has 1 second. But my other question is, I also would like to know if a mental health worker does respond, how many times they need to ask for police response as well. I mean, and I think that would be helpful for us to know, and whether they respond at the same time, whether or not the mental health worker gets there first and says, you know what, I think we need a police officer here along with me. I would just think if we can find out that data, it would be helpful. Vice President Albernos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So serendipitously, as chair of HHS, I've been involved in conversations from the mental health standpoint in terms of response calls generally. And I completely understand and respect needing and wanting that information. But I think context is going to be really important in cases like this as we look at general policy. For example, was a firearm included in the call that was made? And so, and there are instances, that mental health professionals have shared with us that they would prefer not to respond to these calls by themselves, particularly those late in the evenings and early in the mornings, depending on the nature and of what cases we're talking about here. So I think it's reasonable to ascertain that information, but I don't know if within the policy we can make sure that we're taking into account those very reasonable issues that may lead to a law enforcement response along with or instead of a mental health caller response. I don't know what the answer is, but I also don't want us to provide information that is not fully accurate and doesn't have that context, and then leads us down a road that may not be the right road to be leading us down. So again, I don't know what the solution is here. I agree with the general intent, but if there's a way that we can take into account those other underlying issues that go into how a mental health response call is responded to, I think we should.
Well, and it was pointed out to me on many different occasions, someone that needs a mental health response, and certainly we need to be doing much better than what we're doing to getting people there as quickly as we can. But they also could be doing more than having an issue. They could be very violent. I mean, I know that fire and rescue also at times will say, we'll have to wait for a police officer to arrive. So I think it would be necessary to get as much information, because if it looks like we're having so many people, police and a mental health worker there, that if we can narrow down why they also were there, why both were there, to your point, Vice President, I think that would be helpful, not only to us, but to know for staffing, to know for all of these other issues associated with it.
Yeah, and as a follow-up, Chief Frank, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know in real time, the Department of Health and Human Services is working with law enforcement to affirm the policies and practices of the crisis management team, which we are refining as we learn more, as more resources become available, as more training becomes available. So this is a little bit of an evolving policy or procedure within both HHS and the force. Could you elaborate on that if you're in a position to be able to, because it's relevant to this discussion? I think we should collect this data, but it needs to be more nuanced than just how it's been presented.
Sure, and one of the comments I was going to have on reading over the packet is there is a lot of nuance here, because a lot of very complicated issues, which we've had that word several times today. So so we're working with our HHS partners who really have a primary role in this, getting folks to scenes, getting folks to go out and meet with individuals and offer services, do assessments, and divert as best we can. There's certainly some significant safety issues that we're working through in modeling this program and how we approach these scenarios, because as unfortunately as we've seen, that there can be some very significant risks to our HHS folks. So we're working through what this has looked like, how you can classify the different things in a reasonable way to ensure safety for everyone. The Reimagining Public Safety Implementation Committee is working on this, along with all the efforts from Council's efforts for increasing crisis center staff, increasing HHS staff, and we're looking at the CAHOOTS model and how to put that into place. So there's a lot of work to be done and figured out. And even beyond that work, again, it's not just as easy as saying, okay, you folks are going to go to these calls. There's still significant labor contract things that need to be reviewed and worked through. There's significant training that needs to be worked through. So it is a very daunting task, but we're on it, and we're working. And I should add in our fire rescue partners too. We're all trying to see what we can do to ensure that the best qualified people get to these scenarios. In looking at some of the things, and I go back to, explaining why we can't get some information and my concerns there. I will say, when you look at, for example, the number of calls for service involving substance abuse, or the number of calls for service involving mental health issues, again, a lot of these things are self-reported, and these officers don't have the ability to diagnose. They can make assumptions, but that gets difficult. It can be very problematic. We can say from their experience, but going back to what I said earlier is I like precise data. It's going to take, as these changes come into effect, it's going to take some work between all of us to define methodology for determining this and satisfying answers. I will tell you that for reasons that we've all seen, a lot of citizens don't want to report things to either the government or to the police, and get very defensive with those things. So you have this culmination of issues. I appreciate everyone wanting data and wanting good data, but there are definitely some hurdles in our way that we're willing to work through as best we can, with the understanding that there are hurdles.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to propose that we certainly continue to explore this specific recommendation on capturing data on mental health response calls, but that we do have our colleagues in the Department of Health and Human Services, give them the opportunity to weigh in as well on this, so that, you know, as we develop this system in place, we have accurate and relevant data that will help inform all of us as we respond to these calls. It's not to say we need to collect this data. I just want to make sure we're collecting the right data in the right way that's helpful to everyone involved, especially the people who are being responded to and have these cases. And I'll just give a specific example. So I keep referring to it because it did leave a significant impression on me, but this ride-along that I went on a few months ago, there was a domestic violence case that we responded to that night, and it involved the boyfriend who was known to have a gun. And the significant other responded, called 911. Actually, the call came from a neighbor within the garden apartment who had heard them fighting. And it got very loud and it got very violent with things being thrown around. And so law enforcement responded to that call, but it was a mental health episode. This gentleman was in crisis from a mental health standpoint, but there was a weapon involved. And so how would that information be tracked? How would we expect law enforcement to track the fact that domestic violent case, gun involved, mental health case, and also from the Health and Human Services standpoint, and so that there's just a lot of layers to these. That's one of 1,000 examples that are complex and that we need to sort of think through. But that would be my suggestion, is to get some feedback from HHS on how, not if, but how we collect this data.
And I'm in agreement with you. And I believe there should be some protocol that if, and there again, I mean, I'm not an expert certainly, but if a call comes out that there's a gun involved, I don't believe that from HHS side, that they should respond without a police officer present. I mean, they're putting themselves in harm's way. So I think I agree. We need all the information. I think all this information will be helpful to all of us. But anyhow, I think that would be helpful. Meanwhile, I just got an email, a text from a gentleman by the name of President Tom Hucker, who would like to be let back into this meeting. Now, we can vote and decide whether we want him back in or not, but he would like to be admitted back in. He got knocked off.
Sorry.
No
matter what time.
I did vote to let him back. Tom, I voted to let you back in.
Thank you. I owe you one.
It was a close vote, Tom. It was close, but we let you back in. Okay.
There's never.
But anyhow, I don't know if you heard or all of what we just went through, but the vice president suggested that we get all this information, but we need to get it in the right way and to be most helpful. And I have a feeling you're in agreement with that. But go ahead, Mr. President.
Oh, I am. I don't know if it was answered, but I mean, I'm for collecting more data and disaggregating it if it's not, too burdensome, and especially the department thinks it's helpful. My question about the recommendations was on the vague commands to report whether there's a suspicion of behavioral health and a suspicion of homelessness. I'm not sure if I'm a police officer, how I know that necessarily. I know I've received some training and maybe it's obvious for certain people, but for people that are homeless, they might be on the street that day. They might not report they're homeless. They might be on their friend's back porch. They might be in their car any individual day, whatever. And what's the penalty if they get it wrong? And is there any unintended, sort of incentive not to report it because they don't want to get it wrong?
I think you hit on a really great issue there, Council President. Again, we have good training, but it kind of goes in line with some bias, right? You want folks to make judgments, and again, a lot of people don't want to admit that they're having a mental health issue. They may not even recognize it, and then we start filling out data sets, documents that's housed that Joe Smith was having a mental health issue on 9/27/2021. Well, no one wants to be behind that if that's not the correct thing to say. I mean, and then we put the police at risk in general for classifying people and lawsuits and things of that nature. It's a very tricky road to go down, especially when you get into such sensitive issues as mental health and homelessness. It has to be very thoughtful. I'm still, again, being new to this bill, I'm trying to wrap my head around how I teach an officer to do that in a way that is fair to our citizens and doesn't stigmatize them. Also, in addition, I will say, and this will probably come up under number 4, requiring asking of race and ethnicity. It's one of those difficult things to ask an officer to do because, again, the distrust that's there. Why are you asking that? I know people want to know it, but there are other people out there that really don't think it's any of our business. And now my fear with some of these, depending on how broad you get, like every interaction that a police officer has with someone, do we shut down the officer's desire to have an engagement with the community? Because that's really what I want. I want officers out. First of all, I'd love to see crime go way down. And second, I'd love to see our officers engaged in those neighborhoods, just saying hi to folks and creating those relationships that when a crime does occur, they can call back on that and have a call back on that connection and make a positive difference in the neighborhood. It is, and I'll go back to what Councilmember Katz said, is getting HHS on board to maybe give us some advice in that manner, because it does concern our officers making judgments on people on things that when they don't want to self-report.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I don't want to collect data that's not accurate either. I'm for doing it if we can do it, accurately. And maybe it's not, reporting suspicion of homelessness, but reporting the answer to the question that you ask the client, do you have a place to stay or not? That's more sort of client-centered and straightforward and not based on a judgment call the police officer's making on the street based on who knows what kind of evidence. But maybe there's 2 or 3 questions like that we could get from people with more expertise about the best way to determine that. Suspicion is just a hard thing to categorize and put in a spreadsheet.
Okay, so I don't know that we've come up with an answer for that one, but
we
came up with several more questions for it, but it is a concern. I mean, you don't want to Chief Frank's point, we don't want someone to feel uncomfortable that they're being asked questions when they feel, that they don't want to be asked. But there again, we'd like to know the information. So, and there, I guess if they ask for identification for someone, and on the identification it has all this additional information, that we are looking for, I guess that would be one easy way to get that information. But if they say, I'm not gonna show you my ID, or I don't have ID, or whatever, then you get into, and at that point, there could be people who are not happy that they're being interviewed at that moment and want to get out of there as quickly as possible and don't want to give that information. So I don't know. There's no easy way to get what we're trying to get to, even though it's for good intentions. Any other comments, or I don't know, proceed?
Just to try to summarize it for myself more than anybody else, but I do think asking HHS to weigh in specifically on this sub question regarding how we disaggregate data so that we are sharing the complete picture in the appropriate context on how these calls are responded to, I think would be helpful. I also think, there are, I don't know where or how HIPAA comes into play with regards to diagnoses and people's personal information, but it's relevant and we need to ask that question. So I agree with the other components of this particular question before us, Mr. Chair, but this one with regards to mental health response, I think needs some help and assistance from a sister agency.
Okay.
I agree. I'd like to hear from more experts on this. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, you didn't recognize me, but
I recognize you. Please go right ahead.
But the wondering if I saw the recommendation, I guess, from the police, the reimagining public safety. Are there any recommendations we have from the Effective Law Enforcement for All group and that just did the audit of our police department? They seem like, if not, they seem like a good resource that's on a contract. We ought to be able to just pick up the phone and ask what they think of this.
I'm looking around to pull up my spreadsheet on their audit, but we're actually still in weekly conversation with them. I'm sure we can engage on that. And
great.
And I've got the list here. And one of the things that I was going to say was I'd like to review this list just on the data collection side with my folks on how in the world we would collect this data. Like, what would be the mechanism? Would it be the RMS? Would it be some of this stuff is easy enough, overtime hours worked per police district. We always have that, but a couple of these others going to the number one, you have the first part is how do you get the data out of the person in a way that doesn't offend them or cause people to shut down? And then number two, where do you capture it?
Okay. So I guess that's as good an answer as we can get for this today, I guess. And
I don't know if Dr. Bonner Tompkins has any recommendations on this or knows where to go, but.
So thank you for opportunity to contribute. So I don't have any specific recommendations at this point, but I think it's worth noting, there's always a challenge around collecting race and ethnicity data. But somehow, if it becomes a priority, it starts to be collected. And so that was the case with the COVID data. So we know that initially that wasn't being tracked. A lot of folks were marking, not responding to the prompt, but over time, that data has gotten better. I would presume it would be the same for any of these data points that aren't currently being collected by the police department, that once there's an effort to start it, that the quality of the data will increase over time. And so I just caution a conversation that basically stops at, well, people are uncomfortable about answering these questions, so we should just not ask them. The fact of the matter is you don't know if disparities are occurring or not if you're not collecting the data. So that really is, it's incumbent on trying to figure out a way to do that well. That actually, as was stated before, you want obviously accurate data, but I don't have any specific, sort of recommendations around how to get to that.
Okay. All right. Are we going to move on from this one? As I say, I think we came up with as good an answer as we can come up with. Didn't come up with a solution, but we came up with some good answers. Okay. Are we all right? We're moving on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just the only remaining issues on issue number 3, there were 2 categories that don't relate to service calls necessarily. One was the number of overtime hours worked per police district, and then the other one relates to civilian complaints and the number of complaints per police district, number of officers against whom the complaints were made, and the outcomes of the complaints. And with respect to the number of overtime hours, council staff would just note that this doesn't seem to pertain necessarily directly to, community interactions with the police. You may or may not want to include it here. Obviously, it's up to the committee. Thank you.
And I'm fine. And I guess the chief had mentioned this earlier. That's really not a difficult data set to capture. And I think that's something that maybe it doesn't necessarily relate directly on this, but it's certainly information that we that we need to continue to have. And I'm fine with that. I am. I don't know where my colleagues are. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and I'm fine with I'm fine with all the suggestions on this. Okay. Are we all in agreement with that? All the suggestions? Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, are you in agreement with all the suggestions on this one?
Yes.
Tom, I don't know if you're frozen. Mr. President, are you frozen? Yeah, there you go. Are you there, Tom?
Yep,
Okay. Are you okay with all the suggestions on this one?
I am. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Very good. Then Ms. Willis, let's move on, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 4, we're on page 8 of the staff memorandum, and this relates to the collection of data on police community member interactions that's reported online, as distinguished from what we were talking about before, the annual reports that are provided to the county exec and the council, which also go to the public as well. But this is more kind of the real-time online data that is transparent and accessible on a day-to-day basis. So there are 2 provisions of the bill as it's currently drafted that relate to this online data. One is this rather general catch-all provision that's described here under item 4. And then the second one is a more specific provision that lays out each type of police community interaction for which data needs to be collected. So with regard to with regard to the catch-all general section, it provides that data would have to be collected on race and ethnicity for each data set that the police department maintains regarding interactions with individuals. So this is rather broad, and the police department, you'll see under subsection A there, under item number 4 on the staff memo, is the question of, is this overly broad? Because obviously, you know, as Assistant Chief Frank was stating, you know, it's hard to, first of all, come up with the whole universe of types of interactions, but then to collect race and ethnicity data on each one seems like something, you know, it seems like a requirement that you're destined to fail, frankly, because of its breadth. At the same time, we didn't want to, in the drafting, and Dr. Bonner-Tompkins can probably speak to this, we don't want to overlook some types of important interactions that will paint a broader picture of community policing. So that's kind of the issue there, whether this general subsection is too broad. And then, well, I'll just pause there, Mr. Chair. Okay. Then there's some other potential amendments to this section.
Thank you. Dr. Bonner-Tompkins, did you have any?
I was just going to reference that in the report, our recommendation was to track it on detentions, and detentions had was the category, and that would include all stops as well as searches, citations, arrests, and use of force. So we had a narrower recommendation in the report.
And I said Dr. Frank, and Chief Frank, though at times I'm sure he feels like a doctor. Chief Frank, I saw you shaking your head. Yes. So
Yes.
You're in agreement with what Dr. Bonner-Tompkins said?
No, I appreciate what the doctor added. I would love to have her brains, but going back to the point is we don't want to shut down interactions, but certainly that's fair on detentions. That we can collect that data and have it. And I think that goes to the problem that we're actually trying to address. Not every single interaction we have with folks. So those are certainly the most important ones we have, because it's preventing people from going on their course of business, going about their day. So I think that's very fair.
I'm fine with Dr. Bonner-Tompkins has suggested. I don't know where my colleagues are on that.
Sounds good.
Yes, we got 2 thumbs up. Okay. So Christina, on that one, you got the answer for that. And then there was a second part to it, right?
Right. And I think actually we might want to, the second part should probably be discussed later, given that if we're going to eliminate the catch-all provision and instead enumerate each specific type of interaction that needs to be captured, probably this discussion under subsection B should be woven into that later discussion, because the recommendation is for each of these data sets to also collect not only the gender, race, ethnicity data, but also to collect information on police districts. That was the recommendation of the Silver Spring Justice Coalition, and then Councilmember Reamer had proposed collecting data by police division and police bureau as well. But those things, if you want to adopt those amendments, they could easily be adopted into the next subsection that you will discuss that has the enumerated types of interactions.
I'm fine to move on if my colleagues are. My colleagues are saying, let's move on to number 5, please.
Okay, and number 5 relates, that we're on page 10 of the staff memorandum, and this relates to subsection C3 of the bill, which does lay out those specific types of community interactions for which data would need to be collected and posted online. So there were some recommendations from advocacy groups to add to the already existing list under the bill, arrests on or immediately adjacent to MCPS property. This calls for service that are placed by MCPS staff, no-knock warrants, searches conducted and whether contraband was found, calls identified as false or frivolous by the reporting officer, and mental health calls. So that amendment is before you at page 10. There are a couple of things that I would like to note for the committee. One is that the no-knock warrants and searches, that data regarding search warrants is also now required under state law. And so I have a separate amendment later in the packet that you could use related to searches, and thus not double dip is not the right word, not require the duplicative, collection of similar data. So, and to marry it up with the state requirement for consistency. And then, so that's the search warrant.
So just so I understand, you're saying for number 7 is what you're saying on for that what you're suggesting, or what is being suggested, is under number 7 for the search warrant data. Is that what you're saying?
Just with respect to the search warrant data, yes.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to note for you, and the police department can comment upon this with much more eloquence than I can, but basically the frivolous call data is not currently maintained, and I believe that the department has some concerns about attempting to identify calls as frivolous and whether that would have a deterrent effect upon citizens or community members, interacting with the police. Okay, I believe that's it.
To that point, to me, there is a huge difference between false calls and what someone might consider frivolous, because somebody who's afraid of something sees something and it might ultimately be a frivolous call, but they didn't think it was a frivolous call. Their intent was not to call in a false manner. Their intent was they were concerned. I always go back to a neighbor of mine. Once her husband had gotten a new car, pulls it in the driveway. She's not home. He opens the door. She comes home, sees a car that she didn't recognize and her door wide open, and calls the police. And the police come. She didn't go in. The police come, straighten everything out, and she was embarrassed by it. And I said, look, you shouldn't be embarrassed. You should be proud that that's what you did. You didn't put yourself in harm's way. And by the way, these things happen. And so candidly, it was probably a frivolous call, but it wasn't a false call. So I do believe we have to be careful on those types of things. Please, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you. I would always consult with my wife before buying a vehicle. Just putting that out there. But so I agree again with the general premise here that this information should be published online. But the mental health calls and some of these other issues are consistent with the other conversation we just had on how, not if, but how we track that information. I'll also note that I think HHS and our mental health responders may be in a better position to provide that information. It may not be law enforcement. Once we have derived and worked out, who exactly is responsible for what within the crisis management team. And so I think that as we populate that information, we have to bear in mind who is responding to these calls and who's in the best position to provide this information. And so I agree with the premise to include it, but I don't think we're there yet in terms of figuring out exactly how all of it will work. And so that would be my only reservation at this point in including it within the discussion. The others are fairly straightforward, but it's just those mental health calls again that I don't think we've resolved yet.
Right. I'm with you. I agree with you. You okay, Tom? Yes.
Okay. I agree. Yeah. Thank you.
And Dr. Bonner Tompkins or the police officers, are you in agreement? Are we okay on this?
I'll let the doctor go.
Oh no, I'm fine with that.
So as long as I'm in the right place, for calls identified as false or frivolous, again, that becomes a problem with, as already noted, the perceptual part. People, and a great example that you brought up, Councilmember Katz, that is going to provide problems for us because we aim to serve everyone in their thoughts. See, it kind of goes with see something, say something. I do think there might be a better category that I think that might be what it's going after is anonymous calls that and I'm trying to think on the fly how to word this, but it always bothered me. It bothers our officers. We would get anonymous citizen complaints about something, and it kind of goes to someone in my neighborhood. I want to report it, but I want to be anonymous. And so what is that person trying to say about what's going on in the neighborhood? What are they really reporting? And I've talked to my officers in 3D. We'd get sent to things where under the cloak of anonymous, a citizen will report an African-American youth walking through the neighborhood. And they'll try and allege something else. And we got there, and honestly, we found out a young man was doing nothing. So I would ask for a little bit more, maybe narrow that L, because I think there's more relevant data to the problems we're trying to solve. And I'll do my best to articulate it better than I am on the fly here.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I do believe that and there again, for an anonymous call, you want someone, if they feel uncomfortable, whether you would like them to identify themselves if they call, but if your choice is that they call and be anonymous or not call at all, then you want somebody to call in anonymous as long as it's for the proper reason. As you stated, obviously that was an improper reason. So I don't know how we're going to word it. I do believe that if that's information we can capture, maybe it's that it's unfounded calls. I don't know, but something. We want people to feel comfortable calling. We want people to feel comfortable for the right reasons. We want people to feel comfortable that with the information that we're receiving for the right reasons. But we have to be careful what we're doing. I mean, this is another way that people will feel that we're not being as fair as we should be, and that's not our intention at all. Our intention is to be as fair as we possibly can be. So I don't know, Christine, you have the pleasure of trying to unravel this, but that's, I think, where we are. I think we're in agreement with that. Dr. Tompkins, please. Bonner Tompkins, please.
Thank you. I just had a thought about when I lived in another county, and I'm not sure if it's the case in Montgomery County. If you have like false alarms on your house, you get like a waiver one or two times, but if it's repeated, then you get a penalty. Is there some kind of way to track what might be unfounded calls? Where there's a grace period of 2 times, 3 times. I don't know what the number is, but then at some point, if there's is seen as being excessive, then that person would have a consequence, a conversation, or at least it would just be on someone's radar.
So we don't have so yes, we have a false alarm reduction unit. We definitely have that. The as far as dealing with something like that, we usually do that through our community services officers. I had a couple of those cases, both in the 1st district and 3rd district, where people were calling in things that they shouldn't have been calling in. And we'd have those conversations offline. About a penalty, I don't know if you can get to a penalty, but I will say we do, for excessive violators, we have that conversation. We can explore that a little bit. We can explore that a little bit more. Is there something else we can do? Because the liability side of it is, right, the boy who cried wolf, and then all of a sudden wolf showed up. We'd be neglectful if that one call out of 10, something terrible happened. So it would take some extra thought for us to put into.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that's I think that's something we have to be very careful on. And I agree with the concept, but I think we have to be very careful. Okay, so are we going to move on to the next one? I know that we have 7 coming. Well, next is 6. So
Yeah, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, could I summarize
please,
where I think you are with number 5 so that I have good direction? Okay,
Yeah.
So I believe it sounds like the committee wants to move forward with a version of this amendment that's at the bottom of page 10. But specifically regarding H and I, the mental health calls and substance abuse calls, we need more expertise, more input from HHS about how to gather this data. And then regarding the no-knock warrants and the searches, we want that data, but we would marry it up with the language from the new state law that also requires collecting that same type of data on searches and no-knock warrants. And then regarding M, false or frivolous, you want to further explore how to narrow this down to, bias motivated calls, essentially, or unfounded calls. And I would suggest, Mr. Chair, I can try to do some research to see if other jurisdictions are collecting that, if there's maybe, obviously the police department can give this further thought too, but if there's some better wording besides frivolous, which obviously is problematic for the reasons you stated. And then I think the committee wants the information under M about, all variations of stock data. That's correct. And then, Mr. Chair, the only other thing is this leads back to the issue of, do you want the information to be collected, broken down by police district and division and bureau level as well? I guess that's the outstanding question here with number 5.
There again, if it's not difficult to collect, I don't know why we wouldn't do it that way and have a total figure at the end. I think that would be fine. If it becomes difficult to collect, I'd like to know why it would be difficult to collect, but I'm fine. As I say in the very beginning, any information that we can get to be as transparent as we possibly can, I think would be helpful. So that's where I am.
I agree.
Okay. All right. So we're okay on that, Christine?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 6, we're on the second half of page 11. of the staff memo. And this item relates to SWAT team data. And under new state law, the police are required to periodically report. Every 6 months, they're required to report regarding the deployment of SWAT teams. And then you'll see under the state law is enumerated there. You can see the different specific pieces of information that the police are going to need to collect. So the question for the committee's consideration is whether you want to explicitly fold that into this bill, the data collection bill, and require that same data to be posted online, but with the additional breakdown for race, gender, and ethnicity.
You know, I'm fine to do that as well. I mean, obviously we have to follow the state law, and we will follow the state law. But I have no problem having it on the available in Montgomery County on their website, and I have no problem if to break it down the way we would any other situation. Anybody else on that one? Mr. President, Mr. Vice President.
I agree. I'd love Chief Frank to just weigh in. I know the issue of our SWAT team. I've heard from our SWAT team. I've heard from our residents. Just from the chief's perspective, do you concur, or does this in any way make it more difficult or impede in some way? I can't imagine that it does, but I just would love to hear your perspectives on it.
No, I don't think it impedes. I think as long as we, with the data that is collected, we don't associate it with address, and we only associate it with some general crime information. Obviously, we're not going to put our operations, our tactics and operations forward facing, and collecting the data doesn't jeopardize that. But we also don't want to jeopardize investigations or unduly point out addresses or things like that. So just staying at the top level of it and not diving any deeper, I think it's doable.
Okay. All right. We're good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Ms. Wellens?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The issue number 7, you previously discussed with respect to the state law and search warrant data.
Yeah.
So that would be folded into the prior amendment under item 5 that we discussed. So those are all the issues that I had, and I don't know if you would like another work session for the additional issues that you need to work through, or how you want to proceed from here.
Well, I'm going to call on my colleagues I don't know, as much as I would like to vote on this, I think we need a clean copy to vote on as best we can. So if we could have one more very quick work session as soon as possible to have a clean copy. There's been so many discussion points on this one that I always feel uncomfortable until you actually say, well, everything is good except for these 3 words. So that's where I am. Where is Tom, you're okay with what
I agree.
I'm saying?
Yeah. Shouldn't take long.
I do agree. However, since we're diving into HHS, I would ask that we explore whether it would be appropriate to include the HHS committee in that discussion, since some of the data we're going to be collecting or requiring to collect will be collected by HHS most likely. So just to make sure we get it right.
You're absolutely right. We've waited this long. We might as well wait at least one more work session and really get it right. So I'm good with that.
It's clear, it's specific to that amendment, not all of them.
No. Especially whatever we need. Yeah.
That way we've done all the work and HHS can share in the credit.
Right. Yeah. Well, their chairman does that all the time. You know that.
Very well played, Chairman.
Okay. So Ms. Wellens, that's where we are on that. So we will come back for a very short work session as soon as possible. And with that, before we end, I do have a proposed closed session. I need a motion to discuss public security, including the deployment of fire and police services and staff, and the development and implementation of emergency plans pursuant to Maryland Code General Provisions, Article 3-305B, subsection 10, Topic is ongoing investigation of criminal activity and police department police deployment and tactics. If there is a motion on that topic, please. And it would be this evening, I think at 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock. So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. It passes unanimously. So we will have that meeting at 5 o'clock this evening. And with that, thank you all very, very much for being with us. We are adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.